Ancient Greek dialects and the evolution of the Greek language through the ancient Greek and Roman period. The beginning of Greek history starts with the Archaic period, around 800 BC. It is marked by the development of the polis, or city-states protected by hoplite military units. Monarchies were gradually replaced by oligarchies and then democracies. It is during the Archaic period that the Greek alphabet was developed. The first surviving piece of Greek literature was composed, the Homeric epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It is during this period that the Greeks start calling themselves Hellenes. There were 4 different Greek tribes speaking 4 different Greek dialects: Dorian, Ionian, Aeolian, and Arcadian. The Achaeans spoke with the Arcadian dialect. They were the most prominent Mycenaean tribe and gave their name Achaeans to all Mycenaean Greeks. They were called Ahiyawa by the Hittites. They were descendants of the mixed Old Stone Age Greeks and the New Stone Age Anatolians. Nowadays, Achaia is a territory in the northern Peloponnese, because that is where the Achaeans had been displaced by the Dorians. However, when the Romans conquered Greece during the 2nd century BC, they gave the name Achaia to the whole territory of southern Greece. The Ionians were also a mix of Old Stone Age Greeks and New Stone Age Pelagians. Their Ionian dialect showed major influences from the Anatolian Pelagian language, especially the words with double S or double T, such as thalassa and melissa. They were centered in Attica, Athens, and Euboea. During the Dark Ages, they colonized the western coast of Anatolia, which was called Ionia. Near and Middle Easterners used the term Ionia and Ionian to describe all Greeks in general. Modern Hindus, Chinese, Persians, and Turks say Yunnan to describe the Greeks of modern Greece. Ephesus and the island of Chios were Ionian. The Aeolians were also a mixture of Old Stone Age Greeks hunters and New Stone Age Anatolian farmers. They originated in Thessaly and Thebes. Their most important colony in Asia Minor was Smyrna, and Mytilene Island was Aeolian. The Dorians originated from Epirus and Macedonia in northwest Greece. They descended from indigenous Old Stone Age Greek hunters. They were the first to be called Greci, or Greeks, by the Illyrians. They used the most primitive dialect of Greek. They used the letter A where Ionians used the letter E. For example, tan matera, itan iepitas, instead of itin iepitis. After the Minoan and Mycenaean cultures collapsed, they spread to the Peloponnese, Crete, southern Italy, Anatolia, and Libya. The most important Dorian cities included Sparta, Corinth, Syracuse, Corfu, and Rhodes. The Dodecanese Islanders are Dorian in ancestry. The Greek alphabet was invented prior to 800 BC. It was based on the Phoenician alphabet with a major innovation, however. Special letters were invented for vowels. For this reason, the Greek alphabet is the first true alphabet in the world. At the beginning, there were many different alphabetic varieties. The Euboean version gave rise to the Latin alphabet, and the Ionian version gave rise to the Hellenistic and modern or Romaic Greek alphabets. Additionally, the Greek alphabet became the basis for the later development of the Coptic and Cyrillic alphabets. The oldest inscription in ancient Greek alphabetic script dates from 740 BC on a vase excavated at Keramikos, Athens. The first surviving Greek literature, as mentioned, were the epic poems of Homer. They were written in a Greek poetic language based on the Ionian dialect with some Aeolian influences. The political changes of the Archaic period, and especially the invention of the Greek alphabet, created the springboard for the intellectual revolution of the classical period starting in 500 BC. Philosophy and logic with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, scientific history with Herodotus and Thucydides, theater with Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. Architecture with iktinos, sculpture with phidias. These constitute dynamic developments of the human intellect. They may likely be attributed to the flexibility of the Greek language now served by the new alphabetic innovation. The power of the Greek language tool in forming compound words that have self-explanatory meanings, when you know the roots, likely propelled the development of thought, literature, and philosophy. The development of language and arts subsequently also promoted the development of sciences during classic and especially during the following Hellenistic period, with math by Pappus, engineering with Hieron and Archimedes, medicine with Hippocrates and Galen, geography with Ptolemy and Eratosthenes, astronomy with Aristarchus, and also biology, anatomy, botany, and so on. Isocrates, the famous orator, claimed that Greek identity is based on common blood, common language, and common religion, homoemon, homoglosson, and homothriskon. Greeks proudly claimed that all non-Greeks were barbarians, not only because of their foreign, unintelligible languages, but also because they lacked in virtue. Likely because Greeks claimed that moderation in all things, nothing in excess. Good is not found in abundance. Good is gained with pain. And the Socratic, know yourself. Nobody is voluntarily evil. I know that I do not know anything. I grow old, always teaching myself. However, we will see that this somewhat arrogant perception about non-Greek speakers as barbarians changed dramatically during later centuries. During the classic times of 5th and 4th century BC, the most prominent city-states were Athens and Sparta. Athens was a democratic city-state and was the Greek center of philosophy, theater, science, and architecture. They used the Ionian Attic dialect. The Spartans were an oligarchy. They are well known for their austere lifestyle. They had the highest literacy rate in the Greek world, especially amongst women. They spoke the Dorian dialect of Greek. This was a more primitive Greek dialect without the Pelagian influences. Rome was an ancient city founded in central Italy around 756 BC. The ancient Greek historians wrote a detailed history of early Rome. They described that the city of Rome was founded by Greek Arcadians and Pelagians from the Greek Peloponnese. The word Rome means power in Greek. Eventually, the Greek founders invited Latin-speaking surrounding Italian tribes to inhabit the city of Rome and contribute to its development. The Greek founders had strict laws that forbade intermarriage between Greek and Latin speakers. The division between privileged patrician Greeks and subordinate Latin plebs persisted for many centuries. The distinction between patricians and plebs was certainly racial and not financial. Eventually, in 501 BC, the Romans established a republic in their city. The city was bilingual, with most citizens speaking both Greek and Latin. During subsequent centuries, through conquests, Rome expanded and occupied the whole Italian peninsula. After a civil war between Romans and their Italian allies, Roman citizenship was granted to all Italians. The classic period in Greece ended with the prominence of Macedonia and the conquest of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was king of Macedonia from 330 to 323 BC. Macedonia spoke a Dorian dialect of Greek. After his father Philip united the Greeks in one state, Alexander started a successful expedition of conquering the Persian Empire and extending the borders of his empire as far as Egypt and India. Besides being an unmatched strategist, he was also a great visionary whose goal was to spread Greek culture and civilization, education, art, science, and Greek virtue throughout the whole known world. He founded 70 cities in Asia alone. However, the most famous city he founded was Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria was to become the center of world culture for many centuries to come. At the conclusion of his conquests, Alexander addressed his subject with his famous oath. I wish all of you, now that the wars are coming to an end, to live happily in peace. All mortals from now on shall live like one people, united and peacefully working towards a common prosperity. You should regard the whole world as your country, a country where the best govern with common laws and no racial distinctions. I do not separate people, as many narrow-minded others do, into Greeks and barbarians. I am not interested in the origin or race of citizens. I only distinguish them on the basis of their virtue. For me, each foreigner is a Greek, and each bad Greek is a barbarian. If ever there appear differences amongst you, you must not resolve them by taking to arms. You should resolve them in peace. If need be, I shall act as your negotiator. You must not think of God as an authoritarian ruler, but you should consider him a common father, so that your conduct resembles the uniform behavior of brothers who belong to the same family. For my part, I consider all, whether they be white or black, equal. And I would like you to be not only subject to my commonwealth, but also participants and partners. You should regard the oath we have taken tonight as a symbol of love. The Hellenistic period started after the premature death of Alexander. The Hellenic cities were now unified into a new vast world that included other peoples that were extensively Hellenized in language and culture. The Hellenistic successor states thus continued to realize Alexander's vision. Greeks of various tribes and dialects flocked to populate new large metropolis cities in Asia and Egypt, such as Antioch and Alexandria. The coexistence of various Greek dialects with Hellenized foreigners in the East quickly led to a new Greek mixed dialect known as Hellenistic or Koine Greek. Hellenistic Greek was mainly a simplified version of the Ionian dialect injected with many Aeolian features. Both grammar and pronunciation were simplified. Cursive small letters were invented for the first time, as they were more suitable for writing on parchment. In 200 BC, the three diacritic accents were proposed and adopted: acute, grave, and circumflex. They served to remind foreigners how to change their voice pitch when speaking Greek. Musically, with prosody. Gradually, prosody was abandoned altogether. The modern Cretan dialect perhaps preserves some elements of prosody. So this Hellenistic Greek language became the language of communication, or the lingua franca, in the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East, and as far as Pakistan and India. During the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, the Romans increasingly became mediators of the Macedonian successor states. In a number of decisive battles, they crushed and took over the Hellenistic states. The Romans granted major privileges and even independent rule to many Greek states, as in them they recognized their roots. They also took the advantage to use Greek scholars and teachers to augment the Hellenic element of their bilingual city. Keep in mind that the first Roman annalist historians wrote the history of Rome in Greek. In the 5th century BC, 300 years before the occupation of Greece by the Romans, Heraclides, Plato's student, stated that Rome was a Greek city. St. Paul wrote his epistle to Romans in Greek because Romans spoke Greek. In 30 BC, the Roman Republic was replaced by an imperial government, the Imperium Romanum, with its first emperor, Octavian Augustus. The Mediterranean Sea had literally become a Roman lake. People could peacefully and freely travel throughout the vast empire. The Christian religion started in the 1st century and spread like wildfire, especially throughout the Hellenized eastern and southern part of the empire. The persecution of Christians failed to stop the spread of Christianity, as Hellenized citizens were sensitized to ideas of spiritual freedom and the seeking of the truth, and were very fast to shed the superstitions and myths of their pagan religions. The shedding of pagan superstition, however, was accompanied also by the gradual rejection of the name Hellenes by the Greek Hellenistic speakers. After the Jews had been conquered by Alexander, they used the term Hellene to describe the believers in the Olympian gods and eventually all Gentiles. This religious interpretation of the word Hellene was inherited to the Christians of the Roman Empire, where the Roman Emperor Caracalla granted Roman citizenship to all inhabitants of his empire. The Christian Greek speakers quickly and permanently rejected the name Hellene and Greek for themselves and only called themselves Romans to this day. Now back to the Hellenistic Greek as lingua franca in the Middle East. Alexander's successors founded 10 cities in Palestine, known as the Decapolis. Such cities included Damascus, Philadelphia, Gerasa, and others. Those became major centers of Hellenization of Palestine. The Greek-speaking Jews of Alexandria translated the Old Testament to Hellenistic Greek during the 3rd century BC, known as the Septuagint. Other books, such as Maccabees, were originally written in Greek. Even in 1st century Galilee and Jerusalem, the vast majority of tomb inscriptions are in Greek. That suggests that the main language spoken by the Lord Christ may have been Greek, but this is a topic for a separate discussion. At least his dialogue with Pilate had to be in Greek. Keep in mind also that the inscription on the cross was written first in Greek, then Latin, then Hebrew. All 4 Gospels were written in Hellenistic Greek, as well as the Acts, the Epistles, and the Revelation. During the 3rd century, the Roman Empire went through a major crisis. The Roman legions kept changing the emperors. There was political and financial instability due to corruption and a declining culture. Germanic tribes in the north and Persians in the east threatened from the outside. The man who saved the day and the empire was a Latin-speaking Roman of Illyrian and Greek ancestry, Constantine the Great. Prior attempts to provide unity in this multi-ethnic empire had been based on promoting the cult and deity of the emperor. Constantine perceived that the Christian religion could play the role of the unifying force. First, he made the Christian religion free with the Edict of Milan, and then he encouraged and funded a Christian council that would establish a common belief for all Christians. This was the Council of Nicaea in Asia Minor in 325 AD. The official language and minutes of the First Ecumenical Council was in Hellenistic Greek. The creed was articulated in Greek. The language provided the necessary terms to express precision in the creed and distinguish orthodoxy from heresy. The conclusions of the council became the law of the state. Additionally, Constantine gave new life to the empire by making a revolutionary decision. He built a new city in the heart of the Christianized Greek-speaking world in the east, at the strategic crossroads of Europe and Asia. On the site of an ancient and small Greek colony named Byzantium and close to ancient Troy, he built his new capital. He named it New Rome. It was later better known as Constantinople. He had the Senate of Old Rome, the administration, and the patricians transferred to the new capital. All the upper class of Old Rome followed to the new city. This is when the Greek speakers abandoned Old Rome. Subsequently, the Pope of Old Rome had to switch the language of liturgy from Greek to Latin. This is when Old Rome became a Latin-only speaking city for the first time in its history. Constantine was successful in realizing the vision of Alexander. By promoting Christianity, he managed to create a unified Roman nation where all were equal regardless of language, color, or race. Being Roman meant no more being a resident of Old Rome or a persecutor of Christians. Romans were now redefined as free citizens of the Imperium Romanum or Romania, with their capital being New Rome. The New Romans were primarily Orthodox Christians, the common religion promoted by their Roman emperor and the ecumenical synods. They continued to be bilingual, especially in Constantinople. Latin was the language of law and administration. Greek was the language of church, commerce, and science. In the name of the newly discovered truth of Christ, the descendants of the Hellenes abandoned their Hellenic name, ceased calling other nations as barbarians, and accepted a common name for all Christians, the name Romans. Over the next several centuries of the first millennium, the Hellenistic Kini language continued its process of simplification. Hellenistic Greek quickly transformed into Romaic Greek, a form of Greek very close to modern Greek. Scholars noting this language simplification distanced themselves not only from Romaic Greek, but also Hellenistic Greek, and used Attic Ionian Greek of the 5th century BC. This established the phenomenon of diglossia, classic Greek for literature and Romaic Greek for speaking, which started as early as the 1st century and continued till the European Renaissance. Please watch the third part of our series where we discuss about the Romaic Greek language and the names of the Greeks.